Imagine this. The storm outside is howling, lightning shatters the sky, and you wake up to find your closet door cracked open when you know you shut it tight. Or picture yourself frozen in bed as a man with a scar drags his fingers across your window in the middle of the night. This isn't fiction. These are real stories. Terrifying, unexplainable, and absolutely unforgettable. Now think about a stranger signing your yearbook with the promise, "I'll be seeing you again." And hours later, that same stranger is outside your house, pounding on the glass, trying to get in. Or a girl's trip to the beach that turns into a nightmare kidnapping, saved only by seconds before it was too late. And maybe the most chilling of all, a party drink that leaves you waking up in someone else's clothes, miles from home, your memory wiped clean. Welcome to The Price Paid. Hit subscribe now, because once you hear what these people live through, you'll realize how thin the line is between ordinary life and absolute horror. Stay with us, if you dare. When I was in the second or maybe third grade, there was a night that carved itself into my memory so deeply that even now, decades later, I can still feel the fear clinging to my skin. It was raining harder than I'd ever seen, a storm that rattled the windows and turned the streets into rivers. My parents had taken me home after school, but left soon after for some kind of event. I can't recall if it was a dinner party or a fundraiser, but what I do remember is the call they made later that evening. The storm had intensified, making it too dangerous to drive back across town, so they decided to stay with friends until morning. I was left alone, too young to understand why my parents kept apologizing, why my mother repeated instructions like a mantra: lock the doors, close the blinds, leave a light on. At that age, the idea of solitude felt like freedom, not danger. Candy without limits, television until my eyes stung, no bedtime. I promised myself I would handle the checklist before crawling into bed, but sugar and exhaustion pulled me under before I could finish. When I woke hours later, the TV was off and the house was cold, unnaturally cold. The kind of chill that doesn't just sting the skin, but burrows into the chest. I dragged myself up, remembering my mother's words, and went through the motions, checked the locks, pulled the blinds, pressed my hand against the glass to feel for cracks. Everything was sealed tight. Still, the chill persisted. I blamed the storm, told myself the heater had failed, and trudged upstairs to bed. But in my bedroom, with its large window exposed to the fury of the storm, the atmosphere shifted. The thunder rattled the glass. Lightning illuminated the room in violent flashes. I wasn't afraid of storms, but there was something else, a faint creak, a sound that didn't belong to weather. My ears strained, and each crack of lightning seemed to confirm the suspicion blooming inside me. The only wooden thing in the room was the closet. I remember the exact moment lightning flooded the room again, revealing the closet door ajar when I had closed it earlier. My heart turned to ice. In that brief flash, it felt like someone else was in the room with me. I didn't scream. I didn't call out. I simply moved. Each step toward the door stretched into eternity. Downstairs, I hid beneath the dining table, my chest heaving silently. Then came the footsteps, chaotic, unsteady, as if someone was half stumbling, half bouncing down the stairs. I'll never forget the sight. 2 bare legs, wet, muddy, covered in cuts, tinted with an unhealthy yellowish hue. The intruder dropped something heavy, a wrench, and for a moment I thought they would bend down and see me under the table. But they didn't. They simply wandered through the house, then left, slamming the door behind them. I stayed frozen long after. By dawn, I was too ashamed to admit I hadn't locked everything properly. I buried the experience inside, letting it fester into years of nightmares and an unshakable fear of the dark. But fear doesn't only live in the waking world. Sometimes it follows you into dreams. Around the same age, I began experiencing recurring nightmares, unlike anything I'd heard other kids describe. I wasn't inside my body, I was looking at myself from above, as though a camera floated near the ceiling. My clock ticked backward. Crayon drawings appeared on the walls. Children holding hands in front of a house I didn't recognize. A toy train I had lost years before would sit in different corners of the room. And always, the dream built to the same unbearable climax. The moment I turned toward the window, a man appeared there, face pressed close to the glass. Short gray hair, a scar across his temple, his fingers clawing at the pane as if trying to open it. Every time I woke, gasping, I checked the window. Locked. Always locked. At first, my parents dismissed it as recurring childhood dreams. My father tried reassuring me, even walked the perimeter of the house with me. But after one particular night, when the window in my dream appeared open, I woke to actual cold air blowing across the room. For minutes I lay paralyzed, convinced the man was seconds from climbing in. Years passed, the dream slowed, and then one night when I was older, I described the man to my parents in more detail. The scar, the gray hair, the way he watched me. My father's face changed. My mother looked away. They eventually told me about someone named Brian, a man they once called Uncle Brian. He wasn't family, just an old friend of my dad's who had been around a lot when I was a toddler. They never told me why the friendship ended, only that he was no longer allowed near me. But Brian had a scar on his temple, the same scar from my dream. My father suggested that maybe my mind was unearthing buried memories fragments from when I was too young to speak in sentences. The implication was that I had once known this man, that my attachment to him had been strong enough for the memory of his face to haunt me years later. And then came the night when I thought I saw movement outside my actual window. My father ran out barefoot, later whispering to my mother about faint footprints beneath the glass. They called the police, or so they claimed, but I never heard sirens. I never had the dream again after that. To this day, I don't know what was worse. The possibility that the dreams were nothing more than my subconscious trying to piece together old fragments, or that someone, maybe Brian, maybe a stranger, had actually been outside my window, watching, waiting, each time I dreamed. It was the last day of middle school, a day usually filled with nothing but laughter, rushed goodbyes, and the excitement of freedom. My school was massive, over 1,000 students, so the teachers had devised a system. We handed our yearbooks over, and they were passed around from classroom to classroom so everyone had the chance to sign. I remember flipping through mine at the end of the day, eager to see the scribbled jokes and well wishes. Most of the notes were the typical, "Stay cool," or "Have a great summer." But then my eyes landed on something different. It wasn't just the handwriting that stood out, it was the name. Signed under the portrait of a student I had never spoken to before were the words, H-A-G-S,
Please, pick up.
"I'll be seeing you again." The name attached was Samuel Robinson III. At first I thought maybe it was a mistake, or maybe just an awkward kid trying too hard. After all, in a school that large, it wasn't impossible that people would mix up whose yearbook they were writing in. But the way it was worded lodged itself in my head like a splinter, not "see you around" or "hope we hang out." It was a promise. "I'll be seeing you again." That night, I didn't give it much more thought. I had friends sleeping over in the basement, my parents asleep upstairs, and our world was Doritos, Call of Duty, and the kind of laughter only kids at the edge of adolescence can generate. The basement had no windows, which meant we were sealed in our own bubble, loud and carefree, until the knocking started. It was sharp, deliberate, against the storm door. We froze. None of us had been expecting anyone, and it wasn't the kind of knock someone would use if they were just confused about which house to visit. It was steady, rhythmic, almost rehearsed. Then came the worst mistake of the night. One of my friends, without hesitation, shouted out, "Who's there?" That was all it took. Whoever was outside now knew exactly where we were. The knocking stopped, followed by a pause that stretched too long. Then a muffled voice answered. It was cheerful, even friendly, pitched high like another teenager. "Come around to the back door," the voice said. My stomach turned. There was no reason anyone would tell us to meet them at the back door unless they wanted privacy. My friends, though, weren't immediately alarmed. They were curious, maybe even excited, at the thought of someone trying to crash our sleepover. But I knew. Somehow, I already knew who it was. We crept upstairs, my pulse hammering in my ears. Through the narrow glass pane by the back door, I could see a shadow. As I got closer, the face emerged from the dim porch light. My breath caught. It was him. Samuel Robinson III, the boy whose name I had only noticed hours earlier. My friends didn't see the problem and moved to unlock the door, but I stopped them. I told them who it was, explained the message in my yearbook. Their amusement faltered. Outside, Samuel stood motionless, watching us. He must have realized my hesitation, because he began gesturing toward the side of the house, motioning me to the kitchen window. Against my better judgment, I cracked the window open an inch. My friends crowded behind me, half fascinated, half unsettled. Samuel leaned close, his face lit by the glow from the kitchen. "So you got my message," he said, his tone disturbingly calm. He introduced himself, as though I didn't already know his name, and then added something that made my skin crawl. "I've always watched you from afar. We could have been good friends." Every instinct told me not to anger him, so I nodded, muttered agreement, anything to keep him calm. But one of my friends, braver or dumber than I was, called him a creepy stalker and told him to leave. That was the moment Samuel's expression changed. The blank, almost neutral mask twisted into something grotesque. His voice cracked with fury as he shouted, spewing venom about how much he hated my friends, how he deserved to die. He knew things he shouldn't have known, private details that no stranger should have been able to guess. And then he lunged at the window, trying to force it open. The glass shook violently as his fist pounded against it. His snarls were animalistic, guttural, nothing like the cheerful voice that had first called to us. My friends backed away, eyes wide, finally realizing the danger. I slammed the window shut, locked it tight, my heart racing. The commotion woke my parents, who rushed down the stairs demanding to know what was happening. At that moment, Samuel bolted, disappearing into the night.
Hello there.
My father sprinted outside in his underwear, but came back minutes later, shaking his head. Samuel was gone. I expected the police to be called, but my parents, perhaps out of disbelief or shock, decided to wait until morning. They contacted the school, thinking they could at least identify him formally. That was when the most disturbing revelation came. Samuel had been expelled weeks earlier. He wasn't even supposed to be at school the day the yearbooks were signed, which meant he had deliberately sneaked in, written that message, and planned the encounter. The more I learned, the less sense it made. The school had no forwarding address. His family wasn't listed anywhere. It was as if Samuel Robinson III and his parents had vanished completely. And that left me with the worst part. I never figured out how he knew where I lived. Was he watching me long before that night? Did he follow me home from school? Or had he always known, lurking just beyond my awareness until the moment he decided to make his presence known? Even now, the memory of that cheerful voice turning into guttural screams haunts me. The thought that someone my own age, someone who should have just been another anonymous face in the yearbook crowd, could harbor that kind of obsession, that kind of rage, is almost worse than the intruder with muddy legs or the scarred man outside the window. Because at least those figures were strangers. Samuel wasn't. He was someone who knew my name, who had written me a promise, and he had come to collect on it. When I was 22, I thought life couldn't get much better. I had just graduated, landed a job that paid well enough, and was still living at home with my parents. It meant no rent, no bills beyond my own spending, and a chance to stack money while enjoying the comfort of the same bedroom I had grown up in. Most weekends, I hiked or read or drove small trips, nothing reckless, nothing wild. That summer, though, my college friend Lindsay invited me to her family's beach house. She wanted me, Sabrina, and three of her closest friends to spend a few days by the ocean with her. I had never seen the house before, but the way she described it made it sound unreal. A private stretch of sand, a modern house that looked more like a high-tech fortress than a vacation property. When we arrived, it was even more impressive. Smooth angles, steel and glass, an ocean view that looked painted. It felt like we were stepping into a place where nothing bad could possibly happen. The first couple of nights were typical. Shared bedrooms, bunk beds, late drinks on the sand. The four of us lounged under the stars, sipping canned cocktails, music from a Bluetooth speaker, carried by the wind. It was quiet, calm, until we noticed a flicker of light down the beach. At first it looked like a campfire, but then the light swung, back and forth, in rhythm, a flashlight, and soon, laughter. 3 young men were walking toward us. They looked like typical beach guys, maybe a little older than we were. Their hair sun-bleached, shirts loose, beers in hand. They shouted hello in easy voices, and Thea called back. Before long, they were sitting in the sand with us, drinking, chatting, the atmosphere softening into something casual. They weren't overly flirtatious, but it was obvious what they wanted. After an hour, they invited us back to their place. I was tired and had no interest, but the others, especially Thea, were eager.
I don't know.
They pleaded with me to come, but I shook my head, insisting I'd stay behind. It was late, and someone needed to keep an eye on Lindsay's house. So I went upstairs, showered, and fell asleep in the kids' room we had chosen as our shared space. Hours later, a shrill FaceTime call jarred me awake. Lindsay's voice was shaking, panicked, words spilling out. "They've taken Thea and Sabrina get the car now." For a moment I froze, trying to process what she meant. Then adrenaline surged through me like ice water. My hands shook as I threw on clothes, bolted downstairs, and scrambled for her car keys. My thoughts were scattered, a storm of fear and urgency. But Lindsay's voice through the phone anchored me. She had already called the police. She told me exactly where to go, which direction to drive, which car to look for. I tore out of the driveway, tires squealing against the sand-coated road. It was nearly 3 a.m, no other vehicles in sight. The streets stretched empty, streetlights casting isolated pools of glow. Every shadow felt like it hit a threat. After a few minutes, I spotted a dark SUV moving slowly ahead. My heart leapt into my throat. I kept my distance, phone pressed to my ear, listening as the dispatcher instructed me to stay calm, to stay back until police arrived. I don't know how long it took. Minutes felt like hours. But then, red and blue lights exploded on the horizon. The SUV didn't speed up. They must have thought it was a coincidence, just a routine stop. But it wasn't. In seconds, officers swarmed, guns drawn, yanking all 3 men from the vehicle. They were slammed to the pavement, cuffed, shouting excuses. Then one officer walked to the back. He popped the trunk. Inside were Thea and Sabrina, bound, bruised, terrified. The sight hollowed me. Relief, horror, disbelief all collided. They were alive, but had we waited even a little longer, had Lindsay not gone back for her purse, the outcome could have been catastrophic. Later, when the shock faded enough to speak, I learned their side. After I had left, the drinking escalated. Lindsay stayed relatively sober, but Thea and Sabrina didn't. The guy suggested everyone head to bed, splitting off into pairs. Lindsay tried to leave but argued with one of them who didn't want her to go. He yelled at her, told her never to come back, so she stormed off. Halfway down the beach, she realized she'd forgotten her purse. That's when she saw it, the guys forcing Thea and Sabrina into the back of the SUV. She ran, hid, called the police, then called me. It had been minutes, maybe seconds, between their abduction and her intervention. The men had no right even being in that house they claimed was theirs. Later, investigators discovered it belonged to an elderly couple who were on vacation overseas. The intruders had broken in, used it as a trap. Their charges stacked high: kidnapping, unlawful restraint, trespassing, assault. With Thea's parents being lawyers, every avenue was pursued to ensure maximum sentencing. The men were locked away, likely for decades. For weeks afterward, I couldn't shake the image of Thea and Sabrina in that trunk. The ropes, the bruises, their faces pale with fear. I replayed the what-ifs constantly. What if Lindsay hadn't gone back? What if I hadn't driven fast enough? What if the police had been slower? A handful of decisions, a handful of seconds, had determined whether my friends lived or disappeared forever. The beach, once a place of serenity, became a place of unease. The rhythm of waves no longer calmed me, reminded me of muffled screams against the roar of the ocean. Even now, years later, I find it hard to sit on sand after dark. Thea and Sabrina rarely talk about that night. They're different now, shadows under their laughter. For me, I cling to one brutal lesson. Predators don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they're just 3 young men with sun-bleached hair, holding beers, pretending to be your friend. 4th of July weekend at the Jersey Shore was supposed to be nothing more than music, lights, and too much alcohol. My best friend Jimmy was hosting a massive event, the kind that pulled in well-known DJs and filled clubs shoulder to shoulder. Because I had known Jimmy since childhood, I always got the VIP treatment-free entry, free drinks, backstage access. It felt untouchable, like I was drifting through a dream of flashing lights and endless bass. That night, Ryan and I had started drinking early. By the time the first set began, we were already more than a little buzzed. Hours later, when the club was at full capacity, we were stumbling, laughing, leaning against the bar with plastic cups we no longer needed to pay for. The celebration seemed harmless, just another reckless night of youth. Then came the girls. 2 of them, Gianna and Marcella. Beautiful, well-dressed, the kind of women who looked like they belonged in glossy magazines rather than a crowded club. They spoke with confidence, their laughter cutting through the chaos of the room. We were drawn in without hesitation. Marcella suggested leaving together, and Ryan and I didn't argue. Before we left, Gianna pressed drinks into our hands. It was odd the girls buying for us instead of the other way around, but we shrugged it off. After all, free drinks were free drinks. We downed them quickly, still drunk enough to ignore the twist of unease that flickered in the back of my mind. From the club, we moved on to the sand, walking in the dark with the tide humming nearby. Conversation flowed, deeper than I expect politics, art, ideas. I remember thinking how refreshing it was to talk about anything other than the usual shallow nonsense of nightlife. But then something shifted. My limbs grew heavier, my speech slower. The alcohol haze deepened into something unnatural, almost chemical. My legs felt like cardboard, my arms like weights. Then, just as suddenly, the sensation passed, leaving me drunk but functional. I didn't think too hard about it. We had arrived at a house, a mansion really, right on the beach. Inside, it was more lavish than anything I'd ever stepped into. Marble floors, sculptures on pedestals, rooms that seemed too immaculate for real life. Ryan and Marcella disappeared almost immediately, leaving me alone with Gianna. She leaned in close, her perfume sharp, intoxicating. She tilted her head, lips inches away, and then nothing. A blank wall. No scattered memories, no blurry fragments, just nothing. The next thing I remember is waking under blinding sun in a patch of bushes. My head throbbed, my body heavy, my clothes wrong, they weren't mine. My pockets were empty, wallet gone, keys gone, phone gone. Even my shoes were soaked and stripped of their laces. Panic crashed through me. Where was Ryan? What had happened? I staggered to my feet, disoriented, noticing I wasn't anywhere near the shore. The town looked foreign, unfamiliar, the road leading nowhere. Across the street, a 7-Eleven stood like a lifeline. Inside, I begged the cashier to let me borrow his phone. My fingers dialed the only number I still remembered, by heart my sister's. She answered instantly, her voice cracking with worry. I explained what little I could, asked for Ryan's number, and tried calling him again and again. No answer. My mind spun with possibilities, each worse than the last. And then, unbelievably, Ryan walked into the same 7-Eleven. His expression mirrored mine. Fear, exhaustion, disbelief. He too wore someone else's clothes, his own belongings missing. He too had woken up miles away with no memory of how he got there. The two of us stumbled outside, calling the police. For a moment they listened, serious and attentive. But as we explained further, their expressions changed. They suggested we were simply drunk, that maybe we'd wandered, blacked out, lost our things.
Help me!
We insisted that wasn't possible. No blackout could explain identical stories. Identical timing, identical disorientation. Still, the officers weren't convinced. They reluctantly agreed to drive us when my sister used Find My iPhone. The signal led to a parking lot. There, side by side, our phones lay on the pavement as if placed deliberately. Charged, functional, untouched. The police took this as proof of nothing criminal. They said maybe we dropped them ourselves. They brushed off our fears, told us to be more careful next time, then left. But the truth refused to sit quietly. Back on my phone, I discovered messages I didn't remember sending. To Jimmy, thanks for the event, we crashed at a friend's place. To my dad, safe, found a couch. To a girl I had been texting, just at home thinking of you. Each message seemed normal, something I might have written. But strung together, they contradicted each other. Someone had used my phone. Someone had pretended to be me. Later, Ryan and I drove back to the beach town, determined to find the house Marcella claimed was hers. We retraced our steps along the boardwalk, scanning the row of beachfront mansions. And we found it. We rang the bell. An older man opened the door, frowning. When we asked if a girl named Marcella lived there, he shook his head. No daughter, no granddaughter, no one by that name. We explained, carefully, that someone had lied about owning his house. He chuckled, bemused, but offered no answers. As we walked away, a sickness rooted in my stomach. Something had happened that night, something deliberate, orchestrated. We hadn't just been drunk. We had been chosen, pulled into something much darker, and then, for reasons I may never understand, released. Some people say we were lucky, that whoever was behind it decided not to finish what they started. But luck doesn't erase the feeling of waking up in strange clothes, your body stripped of memory, your life borrowed by someone else. And that's the part I can't shake. Summer's supposed to mean freedom. Warm nights, laughter with friends, the comfort of being young and alive. But for every story we've explored tonight, summer became the stage for something terrifying. A child left alone in a storm discovered a stranger hiding in his closet. Another was haunted by recurring nightmares that may not have been dreams at all, but buried memories of someone who should have never been near him. A single yearbook signature spiraled into an encounter with an obsessed stalker who somehow knew where his classmate lived. A girl's trip to the beach ended in abduction, a rescue made possible only by seconds of chance. And two men walked into a party and woke up miles from home in someone else's clothes, their lives temporarily hijacked by strangers. 5 stories, 5 warnings. Each story carries a lesson about the fragility of safety. We assume our homes are secure because we lock our doors until one night we forget. We assume our dreams are harmless until they reveal truths no child should know. We assume our classmates are just faces in a crowd until one writes a message that bleeds into reality. We assume a night on the beach is harmless fun until the wrong people smile too easily. We assume a drink is just a drink until it takes away hours of our lives. So what do? We prepare. Survival isn't about living in fear, it's about being ready. Always lock doors and windows, no matter how safe the neighborhood feels. Always trust your instincts if something feels wrong. It usually is. If you go out, especially at night, go in groups, keep tabs on each other, and never leave anyone behind. Guard your drinks, even when they come from someone who looks friendly. Remember that danger doesn't always announce itself with a mask and a weapon. Sometimes it wears the face of someone you know. The truth is, you can't prevent every nightmare, but you can lower the price you pay when reality tries to collect. Because safety isn't a guarantee, it's a choice you reinforce every day with every action, every instinct, every locked door. And that's what these stories remind us. If you've stayed with me through this journey, you've seen how quickly life can shift from ordinary to terrifying. You've heard what it's like to stand at the edge of survival, to feel the breath of something unknown waiting in the dark. These are not urban legends. They happened. They could happen again. And maybe one day they can happen to you. Welcome to The Price Paid. Subscribe now, because knowledge, awareness, and preparation are the only shields we have against the horrors hiding just beyond the light.